All right. Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast. We are here with Dionne Nicholls-Germain, expert in leadership development, executive coach, here to talk about imposter syndrome. Welcome, Dionne.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Now, you work with high-performing leaders and executives, and one study showed that 75% of women have experienced imposter syndrome. Let's start with a definition. What is imposter syndrome?
So, imposter syndrome is no matter how much experience you have, how many titles you have, certifications you have, at some point, you believe that someone's going to find out that you don't belong, that you're a fraud. And I can give you a perfect example in my own life of living this out, if you'd like.
Hmm.
So I grew up in a small town called Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I had this big dream to work in fashion on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Got to do that, got to work for various European brands. Now, one of my last positions was actually for a French company. I'd worked my way up the ranks. By the age of 34, I was the director of sales for North America, right? So I basically ran the US subsidiary of this French fashion house in North America. So basically, the weight of their success weighed on my shoulders. By the
Hmm.
time I walked into that, company, I basically was able to turn it around because when I walked in, customers were ready to walk out. Um, I was able to creatively put, strategic, basically strategies in place to turn the business around. And remember, I said it's a French company. So even the pool of people that could even get this job, you had to be able to speak in French and work in French. And I still believed at some point someone was going to find out. Remember, I was director of sales by age 34.
Hmm.
Some point, someone's going to find out that I don't belong and I'm not qualified to be here.
Hmm.
And when I think back to my childhood, I was usually the only pepper in the salt shaker growing up, in my classroom. I came from a single parent household. It always seemed like everybody else had both parents. Um, my father dealt with mental illness, and nobody talked about that back then.
Mm.
So for me, a lot of times you think about imposter syndrome, it's usually rooted in something way back when. And I feel like a lot of that what is still playing out today for me. I've done a lot of work around it since then, but I realized that idea of never belonging, I have a feeling is where that comes from.
Okay. So in your case, the imposter syndrome was something like the fear that someone's going to find out that you don't really, you shouldn't be there. You don't really belong.
Yeah, you don't deserve this. It could be a worthiness thing too, right?
And as a child, you had the thought like, I hope people don't find out that I'm different, that I don't belong.
Yeah, I had a really good, a very thin wall that I was able to put up for a long time. But we know it's not sustainable, right? Because you're always worried someone's going to peek behind the curtain.
So you're an executive coach now. You work with female leaders, and you're seeing so much of this uh, in your clients. What are they doing to kind of cope or mask or, as you call it, putting up a thin wall? What are you seeing people do when they're experiencing imposter syndrome? How are they kind of handling it?
Well, a lot of what heard and I see is that they're actually hiding.
Right.
They're not taking up space. Um, so many of them are like, I won't speak up in a meeting unless I am 155% right.
Hmm.
Because if I'm wrong, one, I'm going to beat myself up for weeks. And
Hmm.
two, someone's going to find out I'm actually not qualified to be here. I'm not smart enough to be here. So it's a lot of hiding, playing small. Um, and so in terms of just even holding themselves back career-wise, because I'm not going to step out and take on that stretch project or that presentation again, because if I get 99%, great feedback, but that 1% of negative, again, it's disaster, it's sort of disaster thinking, worst case scenario thinking. Oh my gosh, they'll fire me, demote me. So that's a lot of what I'm seeing and hearing. And that's what actually inspired a lot of the work that I do and even the book that I wrote, the 90-day Conquering Unforgiveness Journal for high performing high achievers.
The 90-day Conquering Journal for high performing high achievers.
Conquering unforgiveness. So I know we're going to get to the solution, but that's a lot about a lot of which inspired me to write the book was being in a position working with executives around the world. I realized I just kept hearing these recurring themes, and it was across nations. This is a human condition, so I know we'll get into that part, but I'm a firm believer a lot of what can support people in the area of imposter syndrome um, is practicing that self-forgiveness, that self-compassion.
So let's look at what's the opposite of imposter syndrome. Is this confidence, and is it sometimes perceived as, arrogance?
Well, so let's break down confidence because that's something I think that's really important for people is that people think that confidence just comes, right? But it actually comes by doing. We actually got to go and do the thing, do it often enough to then build the confidence. But if we don't have the courage to actually go out and do it, then you can see how we've created our own contraption. And so we are, and then, right, that creates a whole cycle of beratement because now we're beating ourselves up because we won't actually do the thing. And so we feel stuck and trapped. And so yeah,
So confidence requires action.
it does.
We don't just look ourselves in the mirror and say, "You're great and you can do this." So it comes from a repeated action that we really build the confidence, and what gets us to take the action is courage.
It does. So I love what you said there. Yes, we want self-talk matters. So yes, what are we saying to ourselves? And we need the action to back it up. Because what do we know? When we are fully aligned with our speaking, our actions, right? Our self-esteem goes up because we're in integrity with ourselves. We're fully
Yeah.
aligned, right?
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned arrogance. Well,
Yeah,
no, it's not that either. I would say it's about ownership. It's really about owning your gifts, your talents and abilities. How can you get there?
I see. Yeah, that one's arrogance and confidence. Because I've been called confidence and I've been called arrogance. And I laugh both times because inside I feel like imposter syndrome.
Isn't that the wacky thing?
Yeah.
Now, I will add this because men do experience it as well, but from a female perspective, this is also systemic. So it's actually not just a psychological thing that back in the 80s, when we're wearing our big shoulder pads, we're getting into the workforce and rising at the higher levels than we have before, we were still facing. And so now, this kind of man-made structure that's still not really allowing us to fully be ourselves, that we're still thinking we have to, basically assimilate to male, sort of male style leadership, or we're still questioning whether we belong. So it's also a systemic thing. So just putting that out there as well
Hmm.
when it comes to women.
Hmm. Gotcha. Back to imposter syndrome. If you were a doctor and you were diagnosing this disease, is there one question you could ask someone that would create a positive or negative test result on the diagnosis? Is there one question you can ask to determine if someone is experiencing imposter syndrome, other than the question, are you experiencing imposter syndrome?
Mm, that's a good one. And I think it goes back to that do you believe that you are qualified, worthy, belong? Like it really comes down to those questions. Like, do you ever think you are going to be enough?
Mm.
Let that hang.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure how many people could ever just immediately answer that question.
Yeah. My mind went to money.
Mm,
What if it runs out? What if there's not enough? Because if I feel like if I tell myself I'm enough, then I'm just gonna stop progressing, and I'm gonna just,
mhm.
relax and it's like I guess what I'm saying is that my drive in many ways comes from the core belief that I'm not enough.
And it can
If I
work
lose
for you.
that, if I lose my not enough belief, am I gonna have a drive?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It can work for you, no question. I don't know why, Majid, though. I suspect that there's something more driving you. I don't think it's only your not enoughness, because that right there will wear you out. It's not sustainable.
Hmm.
You'll get you so far. And that's what
Yeah.
I do talk about with my high performing high achievers. Because a lot of times there was something that happened way back when, whether that's how their parents, treated them if they brought back a bad report card, right? Because their worth was measured on the A's and B's, right? So it's usually stemming from somewhere. We've been doing it a long time. But if we're to go to our next breakthrough, yeah, you've got to be driven by something much more empowering for that next level of breakthrough. Because
Like
I'm
a
not
vision
saying
or a purpose or a
exactly.
goal.
Yeah. And I just feel you're that internally driven, purpose driven kind of guy. I feel like there's impact in you that you want to make. So I feel like it's more than just
There is. I got goals, I got vision boards, I got vision statements, I got big dreams, and I make them happen.
yeah.
But if I want to really be driven, then I put myself in a situation where there's a big deadline,
Mm-hmm.
the bank account balance is low, so I gotta,
Mm-hmm.
I am
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I think, using the fear of the pain and um, I
But
suppose,
I heard it's not you though. It's the bank account or the deadline,
uh-huh.
but it's not you seeing yourself as not enough. I think that's probably the big distinction.
Yeah, I suppose you're right.
And I think that's the crux of that imposter syndrome
Yeah,
is until, you know, it will work. It will work for a long time, or if I just keep having to prove myself, right? Because that proving thing, that's that ego-driven thing, right? At some point, yeah, we've got to be able to dig into anchor into something either bigger than you, um, uh, more I guess integral to who you are, whether it's a core belief. But yeah, we need something more empowering versus disempowering if we really want to become the highest and best version of ourselves
mm.
and not burn out, not, get overwhelmed and stressed. Because that's what typically happens when we're constantly improving mode.
Tell me about your keynote speech.
Sure. So it was interesting. I just gave a keynote on Wednesday to a group of senior executive women, female leaders. And it
Uh-huh.
was Conquering Unforgiveness, Your Leadership Superpower. Because I do teach it as a tool of empowerment, as you've heard me say several times throughout this conversation, and that uh, forgiveness through the lens of leadership, one, it creates more emotionally intelligent leaders because when we can self-regulate, we can make decisions from not from knee-jerk reacting, right? But
Yeah.
from curiosity, love, empathy, right? We can make clear, more empowered decisions. And what I strongly, tell everyone to the hilltops is that forgiveness is actually one of the highest forms of personal transformation. It just requires more of you when we actually have to choose to respond, right? Versus just react from our
Hmm.
emotions, which we know are not reliable, right? They're
So
fleeting, they can be wrong.
unforgiveness is one's inability to forgive.
It is one's inability to forgive, to let go and release past hurts, betrayals, right? So it is a deliberate choice. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It's a very deliberate conscious decision
Yeah.
to release those negative emotions that are no longer serving us. It really is about facing what is, it's not forgetting. So it's not about compartmentalizing, right, or stuffing these things away because they will find a way to come out somehow. Um, and doing that work, so that you can reclaim your power, your freedom, your peace, your joy.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the stuffing it somewhere and compartmentalizing somewhere. Um, I had a boss tell me that once. I forget what was happening, but there was something challenging and to my emotions. And he said, imagine there's a drawer and you can just put that in the drawer while you're at work.
Hmm.
And when you leave work, you can open up the drawer and have that again. And I think he was probably giving me the best advice that he thought was appropriate and maybe even worked for him. And as you say, through your experience, it comes out some way. And so you're helping people release it through this process called unforgiveness, your leadership superpower, conquering unforgiveness.
Yeah. So, one of the things I believe I was called to do is not just inspire people to forgive, but to actually make it basically doable, practical, and actionable. So I'm not just telling you to forgive, I'm actually giving you a way forward with practical tools and techniques.
Hmm.
Um, so that because everybody intellectually knows they need to practice forgiveness, right? It's for you. We know all of that. But how do we do it?
Hmm.
So that's a big part of what I offer, in terms of combining,
Yeah.
leadership development tools and practical solutions to imposter syndrome and even conflict resolution.
Hmm. Dion, I'm curious what their language is. I'm imagining your high performing women executive clients saying to you, gosh, I just really want this. I want to be able to this. I want to see this. And I'm imagining they're not coming to you saying, I want to conquer unforgiveness or beat my imposter syndrome. They probably have some other language for it. And I'm curious, what are you hearing people say is what they want?
What they want, because well, I'll say many of them they want freedom, they
Yeah.
want peace.
Yeah.
Um, Many come feeling stagnant in whether it's in their trying to figure out their purpose or their next, or they keep sort of attracting the same type of relationship. So they want true love. They want to fully step into their purpose. Like that's what I hear that they desire.
Wow.
But
Those are the
many,
big ones. Freedom,
exactly.
true love, stepping into purpose.
And when we're harboring unforgiveness, and I usually say if those things are happening, you might need to check your heart because for unforgiveness is so far reaching and it can block you, right, even like from a spiritual standpoint, if you will, energetically. So yeah, you might need to check your heart,
Hmm.
and that's where I come in to support them.
Fantastic. So for the people who would like you to be their keynote speaker or to come in, coach their team or work with them individually, how should people get a hold of you?
Sure, so they can find me at my website. It's called liveyourbeslifeforyou.com. The you, so many times again, women were givers, right? And so not from a selfish place, but from a that selfful place. So
Uh,
liveyourbeslifeforyou.com. You could also find me on all the socials at Dionne Nichols, on LinkedIn at Dionne Nicholls-Germain. And yeah, you can always email me at Dionne@liveyourbeslifeforyou.com.
Amazing. And tell me one more time the name of your book.
Sure, it's called the 90-Day Conquering Unforgiveness Journal. And it's
Amazing.
for, yeah.
Dionne Nicholls-Germain, thank you so much for helping us with imposter syndrome, conquering unforgiveness. You've given us some great wisdom today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.